Welcome to Sports Doc Talk. I'm Will Sanchez, along with Dr. Grant Garcia, our orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine specialist. We kicked off the show with having every technical error that we could possibly have, but luckily it was at the beginning of the show. So hopefully from this point out, we are moving and grooving and going strong. Dr. Garcia, how are you?
I'm good. I don't know if anybody's going to notice this, but there is a little commonality between our two screens.
Yeah, we're gonna drive our guest crazy. I don't. I think our special guest, our triple threat, Tom is gonna be like, this is just way too much sports doc talk. I'm out of here. But we're just really happy to have him. And before we get into all of that, let's give a quick shout out to our guest, our recovery shop friends. Take it away, Dr. Garcia.
Yeah. So again, we keep talking about them, but obviously the idea is recovery post-operatively, or just when you get injured. So obviously, Tom's going to be a great segue for this, but this allows me to offer sort of more cutting-edge stuff for my patients. And as a surgeon, it's really important because patients always ask for this. It's just nonstop. They want to know what's the best. How can I get the best? What can I do to be up this level? And that's what we have at the recovery shop. So the ability to get sort of advanced machines, advanced nutrition, et cetera. I'm sure Tom can weigh in on this and how he works on recovery. But these guys have been awesome. So reach out to Mike. You will not be disappointed. And I think, as a patient, if you want this, you also can reach out to Mike and say, hey, listen, I have a surgeon. I'm interested in using this opportunity and I want to have this for recovery. So this can go to patients or this can go to the surgeons. So reach out to Mike and he'd be happy to help.
I mentioned at the top of the show, we have our guest here, and he's the triple threat, right? And when we say triple threat, it's because of the physiotherapist that he is. And for those that are not aware, that's usually a professional that deals with the physical techniques and the manual techniques, and then, puts it all together and provides that education for his patients. So I like to call it the triple threat. So without ado, just talk about Tom, and let's bring Tom on. Tom, thank you so much for being on. We're really excited to have you here, and just to let all our listeners know, Tom's on the East Coast, and we're doing this show really late. So I was busting his chops when he first came on, saying, "Hey, I know you're a proponent of telling all your patients get 8 hours of sleep and rehydrate and do all these things." And right now, we're probably keeping you up past your bedtime.
Well, I got all these bright lights in my eyes just so you can see my face, but the clock's ticking. We all wake up, we all make an alarm to get up, but most of us need to set an alarm to go to bed. So we're keeping that consistency and that circadian rhythm in check for better recovery and performance.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
I think for the viewers, they're going to love this. This is a guy, like I would say the triple threat. I think, Will, we can jump in there is, you have amazing physiotherapists and strength coaches. You have unlimited experience taking care of high level athletes we'll talk about, but also, similar to some of these other celebrity guests that we've had on, that's not all they do,
Yeah.
right? He's going to get into something. He defined a certification thing for physical therapist and strength coach, which is just the next level, right? Like that's so much extra work on top of your job. It's like what I talk about, what I do. I'm the surgeon, and then we do other things on top.
Yeah.
And then he's a co-founder of something called Comp Physio, which we can talk about as well. So this is somebody that's done a lot of stuff. We're really excited to have you on, Tom, and I'm really excited for the listeners to hear about you. But obviously, enough about Will and I. We could jabber on, as you know, for an hour without talking to anybody else. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself so the viewers can hear?
Yeah, so you guys touched upon it. I'm a physio, strength coach, owner of Concept of Movement, which is now Comp Physio and Performance Wellness here in Barrie, husband, father of two. My wife and I, we started our business 12 years ago, just the two of us. It was 4,000 square feet. I had this vision for this, not just rehabilitation, but, full high performance facility. And we found this old garage. It was a Harley Davidson garage. So we got the roll up doors in the gym area. We turned it into a big glass door. But we have a medical side, and then we have the performance side of things. And it started with just the two of us 12 years ago. She was running the front desk. I was the only physio. We had one movement coach, and we've grown it now to 27 staff. So it's become chiro, massage, osteopath, acupuncture, the whole gamut. Because the way that we work with our clients and athletes, it's a holistic approach. And when you have more sets of eyes to look at a problem, you come up with better solutions to the problem. And that's kind of where, over the course of my career, I've been doing this for over 20 years now. I'm also an athletic trainer. I got trained down in the States, and you come out of school and you're like, I want to take courses. I mean, that was me. I was like, I need to keep learning. Like what I have is good, but I know I could be better. And then you take course after course after course. And it came to the point where I've done 100 courses and certifications, and it became flavor of the month. All of a sudden, okay, great. I did a course. I'm excited to do my craft again. Everybody gets this month. And so then everybody gets dry needling. And then I'm like, well, this worked for some people, but how come it didn't work for others? And then everyone gets manipulation. And then everyone gets positional release. And then everyone gets kettlebells. Like it just became this guessing game. And the more I learned, the more I realized I don't know. And I got more confused and disorganized. So I had to take a big step back and look at, okay, what are the fundamentals across all of these tools? Whether it's, becoming an RKC or kettlebell instructor, or learning gymnastics, or, all the way into needling and manual therapy. And when you distill it down, we're really composed of like 5 elements, and it's psychology, neurology, biology, chemistry, and physics. So I started thinking like, well, if I have a better understanding of these 5 things, I can explain to patients what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how I can do it better, right? Like how often clients come in, they're like, oh, what does ultrasound do? Okay, well, it's an electrical current coming into a crystal, creating a vibration, creating a piezoelectric pulse. That pulse is creating sound waves into the tissues, which is creating vibration. That vibration is shaking up the cells, creating heat and increasing blood circulation, breaking up scar tissue, and creating a physiological effect. We can get into light therapy and lasers and all that other stuff, but essentially it's a form of energy being applied to the body, creating a stress that causes an adaptation. So I can break it down into simple physics of like, well, it's just energy coming into the body, causing a stress and an adaptation. That's the biology behind it, right? We know there's a lot of nuance behind it, but when you start breaking down the actual appointment, the relationship, well, what does it start with? A conversation. Okay, I'm going to ask a person questions. They're immediately in the first 12 seconds, do I like this person? Yes or no? Do I feel safe with them? Am I connecting with them? Can I trust them? Now, what that'll do is the nervous system will start to calm down if I get a positive response. If the nervous system shifts in the direction I want, well, what happens? Their breathing calms down. They go more parasympathetic. Their blood pressure drops. And also their nervous system starts to organize. All of a sudden, oh, my shoulder hurts less, right? Because they're not guarded. Not even just simple words that we use have an impact on someone's physiology because of the psychological component. And then we look at biology and how cells and develop, like how we develop in utero, how we develop out of the womb from the ground up. Then we look at chemistry, everything's molecular, the food we eat, the air we breathe, the chemistry, our pH has to be a certain way. And then we look at physics. Well, what does physics have to do with anything? Well, we live in a 3-dimensional world and everything's matter. Well, what's matter made of? Well, when you start looking at quantum, it's energy. It's composed in specific frequencies, vibration, frequency, and energy. And then when you look at the actual, like down to an atomic level, everything's empty space, right? 99.999% of all of us, of every single atom is empty space. And then when you start to think about what affects that, well, thoughts do, because now it comes back up to the person's psychology and belief systems because it creates specific frequencies that affect biology. So to come about in a very, like, as short as a description as I can, when I distilled what we do down as movement coaches and therapists, if we can understand what we do, which is relatively new, into these more older forms of education, it becomes a lot easier to explain what we're doing, why we do it, and how we do it better. And then that allows us to build more information on top of it. Because if I bring in a new tool, I now have these principles in which I can bounce that tool off of to better explain why it has an effect. And we know that not everything works for everybody, but something will work for somebody. So having more tools,
That's awesome.
Explaining what those tools do at the right time on the right person for the right problem, now you're going to get the solutions that you want.
I love that. I mean, I think the point you're making for the listeners is obviously it's a lot of information you just distill, and some things physics, some things biology.
Right.
But I think if I were to distill some points for the listeners, is you heard this is the same way as surgery, right? There is the psychological component, there's the actual component, the biology, the physics of why we're doing this surgery. And that's the same thing that you're talking about. And so it's really important that this is not just a concept that's to one thing. This is the whole medical field. What you're doing versus what I'm doing, it's all the same stuff. And there, you have to treat everything, the whole body,
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, you're probably dealing with this with some of the athletes you've taken care of, but I mean, how often do you say that you're dealing with injuries and you're having to deal with the psychological component of it?
All the time, because people come in with these beliefs of, I can't do this. I was told I will never be able to do that. And I'm like, well, why? Oh, because I have a degenerative disc disease. Like, that's a stupid label. Like, that's like gray hair of the spine. Everyone's got it. Like, some of the diagnoses we have, I mean, we need them so we can communicate and speak the same language. So I can say one thing, I don't have to sit there and explain it. But to a patient who doesn't understand that, it sounds scary. Like degenerative disc disease. It's not a disease. It's like the discs are wearing down. So why are we calling it a disease? It's aging. Okay. So if we can change the language around some of these diagnoses and make them less scary, all of a sudden, they don't get this alarming. I just had one of my colleagues come up to me. He had 3 clients doing exceptionally well. One's a paramedic, one's a firefighter, and I think another one has a physical job. They were all doing really well. They go and get their MRIs, and one has a disc herniation in his neck, and all of a sudden everything got bad again. So for that individual, the diagnosis made him worse. If he just focused, because he put it into ChatGPT and looked at all the possible scary things that could happen, and he's got a family history of ALS, so that's where his head goes. I'm like, no, it's you have a disc herniation. We can change this, right? We're going to make this. So it's a double-edged sword. Some people need a diagnosis. Somebody needs to know what's going on in my body so I can move past it. And others, if they know, they're going to get worse. So it gets tricky, but the psychological component is huge. And I'll give you another example because I had a personal experience last year. I was in the hospital with an invasive strep A, and I went into toxic shock. And I was in the ICU for 10 days. They had to put me on respirators. I had heart failure, liver failure, kidney failure. My lungs were full of fluid. They had to put me on dialysis. They told my wife, get your affairs in order type of thing. And I didn't know how sick I was. I just knew I was super sick. So my ignorance, and I'm like, I'll get through this because I've put the time and energy into my health in case shit happens. That's my insurance policy. So I get out after 10 days ICU. The docs had to do surgery on my ankle. It got infected. My toes are all black. They're like, you're not going to come out of this with any limbs, like with your toes. I said, okay. But I didn't believe that. And anyway, I have all my limbs. I put the 50 pounds back on in 5 months because I put the work in. But I didn't know how sick I was. I asked one of the doctors, I said, Doc, how sick was I? He's like, oh, less than 20% survival. I was like, oh, I was sick. He's like, you were super sick. So, and 4 other people in that same hospital that summer passed away with less stuff going on. Same thing. So he's like, the only reason you're here is because of how healthy you came in. But yes, I did the prep work in case shit happened, but I never believed I was dying. I never had a moment of like, oh, this is it, which may have saved me. I don't know. Right. I mean, I'm pretty stubborn. If someone's just like, yeah, you're going to die. I'm like, no, I'm not. But not knowing and just kind of having that mindset of, I'm just super sick. I'll get through this. I'll put in the work, whatever. That may have also helped. So mindset is
Tom,
everything.
I do. This is classic sports doc talk. We just basically had like a billion questions come up as you were talking.
Sorry.
And that has nothing to do with what we were going to talk about tonight. So this is amazing. No, it's fantastic. This is going to be, so I think I do want to get back to all the stuff that you do because I love the listeners to hear it. But I want to maybe like another few more minutes. We'll ping this around and then we'll go back to it because we will get off track for sure. I see Will's eyes.
I want to ask something.
I'm trying to slow.
Here we go.
I'm slowing you down. I'm slowing you down.
I'm you're
about to go nuts. Basically, you got to talk about this will thing. I mean, this is what it takes. We talk about these players too, right? Obviously, I'm so glad you're here and you had this amazing recovery. Medical, physical, and I have family members that have had bad lymphomas and things like that, and they come in and they are only ones that didn't die, right? Because they had like this physical thing. I had a bad thing happen to me, and I had to have major surgery, and I was shocked how well I was able to bounce back, and it was because I refused to continue. I refused to have a problem. But sometimes you can't refuse. It's just the way that the system works. But I think this is a really important thing. Will, you can probably ask about this too. What you put in before does make a difference. right? And they're like,
Absolutely.
why are you going to the gym? Why are you doing all the work? Why do you do all this stuff? Because when shit happens, like you said, like you don't want to be in that type of shape. Those people are the ones that go fast. So it's a really, I mean, incredible point you just made that the listeners can hear. We're getting some psychology here. We're getting some life changes. This is awesome. So sorry, Will, you ask your question and then we're going to try to digress if we can.
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback on exactly what you're talking about, right? So you talked about in the beginning of the show, you talked about training, right? So whether it's, I'm not sure what certifications, but we know about CSCS and FRC and CFSC and now Strong First, right? Because now we've gone to Strong First instead of when it comes to kettlebells. You have all this training that has built you up for a part of what you do in your profession. But when we talk about mental fortitude and perseverance, not only for yourself, but also how you relay that information and encourage your patients. What does that training look like? How has that been evolved in your life to get mentally strong? And then how do you channel that with your patients?
I always, for me, for like mental health, whenever I'm in a bad mood, I move. I mean, to change the mind, I go through the body. That's why breath works so well. I mean, have you guys ever told your spouse when, if they're getting upset to calm down? Like, what a terrible idea. It never works. Right?
No way.
Don't do it.
Telling my spouse anything is a terrible idea.
Right.
So let's be honest.
But don't tell them to calm down when they're upset, because you're trying to change the mind with the mind. Now, with my children, when they would get upset, if I can catch them in time, I would have them slow down their breathing, because now they're taking their thought off the thing that's bothering them, but I'm changing their physiology and their nervous system instantly just by changing their breathing, because breathing is that bridge between the mind and the body. When we are upset, our breathing changes. When we're happy, our breathing changes. When we are sad, our breathing changes. When we're calm, our breathing changes. So our breathing changes with our neurological state, sympathetic, parasympathetic, but you can also back out of that by changing your breathing to change your state, which is why breath work has become so popular. I mean, aside from the Wim Hof and doing all the ice baths and all that cool stuff, which is fun to do. I mean, it's a little bit of suffering, but you feel good doing it. But the idea is you're changing your state intentionally. You're applying a stress that's positive to create an adaptation to make you more resilient. So if I got to get my clients out of pain, if someone's coming in and they're talking quickly and they're bracing, like I can't, like their shoulders aren't going to move. Their neck, nothing's going to move, because they're in this locked up protective state. Their nervous system's too sympathetic. I just like, hey, let's put one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly. See where you're breathing. I create awareness to what they're doing and how they're breathing. Which hand is moving? Oh, the top hand. Which hand do you think is supposed to move? Oh, the bottom. Let's do that. Get them to do that 5 times, and all of a sudden their shoulders come down. They start to slow down their breathing rate. They start to slow down their talking, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, my neck doesn't hurt as much. Well, no, because we took your foot off the gas, or your nervous system off the gas, to allow things to calm down a bit. And it's simply because of the state that they were in. But I didn't tell them to calm down. I told them, hey, what's your breathing doing? And they shifted their mind away from their pain into what they're doing, into the first movement that we do, which is breathing, which is why a lot of clients, athletes especially, we look at their breathing. I'm like, how CO2 tolerant are you? Are you using your diaphragm? Because if you're not, guess what you're not using? You're not using your core muscles. No wonder your back is all jacked up. No wonder your shoulders and neck are all jacked up, because you can't even use the first core muscle that we started to use when we first came into this world.
This is awesome. We're gonna jump actually to a question we're gonna do later, but you just literally, we're going in different directions. I love this. This is my favorite type of conversation. So you talked about athletes, right? And you get them back, and like there's different approaches, right?
Yeah.
So what do you use as some of your tricks? You already mentioned some of them as the breathing.
Yeah.
What do you use to get some of these patients back? Like, so let's say an athlete comes in, high level athlete comes in, and they're coming in obviously to you, not because they're doing well, right? If they're doing well, they don't come see you, right? That's generally natural. They don't come see me if they're doing well. They don't come see me to say hi. So if someone comes in, are you automatically saying there's something that can change? Is there genetics involved with these people, these sort of like eccentric healers? Like if someone were to put you in a lineup, they'd say that's very impressive, right? This guy survived 1 out of 5 odds. right? Like, but those are what those athletes do, right? When they get injured, there's a certain percentage that don't get back, and there's some that do. So what tricks do you use to try to get them back to that area and try to enhance their recovery?
So I think a lot of people are getting caught in the weeds with all the nuances and the fancy, sexy stuff. To know where somebody needs to go, I need to know where they are right now, which comes into the assessment. So someone comes in, they got groin and low back issues. You know, I've had dry needling in my groin, and I've had my back cracked, and I'm like, okay, cool. Well, if we understand what pain is a signal for change. Pain is a signal to pay attention, saying, hey, there's something wrong here. It might not be the problem, but I'm going to create a loud enough signal here to make you pay attention to find out where the problem is. So even something as simple as, you know, a groin issue or low back, I want to know, can you move your neck? Like, do you have dural tension coming from the neck? If you can't get your chin to your chest without any tension, the dural tube might be not sliding up and down, right? Which is the covering of the spinal cord. If that's not sliding, well, all the nerves out of it, now you've got nerve tension. Well, if
I see Will and I trying to go like this, both Will and I are like,
if you can't,
Will, you're done. Will's out.
Right? Can you look up without any pinchiness? Can you rotate your head and touch your collarbone? If you have pin or pull, okay, then we need to find out, why can't you do that? And then you might be asking, well, what does the neck have to do with a groin? Well, the neck is a reflex. Okay, it's a cervical colic reflex. When I look to the left, it initiates turn to the left, but that initiates rotation, which is a pivot or a cut, change in direction. Because where the eyes go, the neck goes. Where the neck goes, the body goes. So if I can't turn my head to the left, what might I be doing from my lower back? I might be rotating. Guess what the low back doesn't do? It rotates. So now all of a sudden, you're rotating through your lower back, you're destabilizing the pelvis, and now you might be using hip flexors and groin muscles to try and stabilize the pelvis to do the best job it can to protect the spine, because you're moving too much into the spine. So now we're looking at, the hip is moving, the hip is doing its job, but it's doing two other jobs that it's not supposed to do. And now we have overuse, right? We have these progressive tears. And it's not the groin's fault. It's because the groin is trying to do too many jobs to protect other structures around that aren't doing their job. So now we look at physics. Well, your head doesn't turn to the left, so you go into your lower back, and now you're rotating too much into the hip and overstretching the groin. Well, energy moved into the area of least resistance, which is the groin. So now we have this overuse problem, but it's an energy accumulation problem because other parts around it aren't distributing forces across the body effectively. So I need to know what parts are moving, which parts are not moving first, and then I need to restore some balance. Because if I have somebody who's trying to snatch overhead, but they can't rotate through their T-spine, those shoulders are going to get torn up because they can't extend and rotate to that one side. Well, that's got to go someplace. They're going to over rotate through the shoulder, and all of a sudden now they're destabilizing the shoulders. And then over time, we're tearing them down because the shoulder moves well, but the T-spine doesn't. So this is where physics come into play. And when we look at something as simple, can you touch your toes? Like, if you can't touch your toes without tension, why are you swinging kettlebells and deadlifting? Like, it's probably not going to go well. All right. 100%. Runners. I talk about runners all the time. They come in, I got knee, I got low back. Okay, great. Stand on one leg with your eyes closed for 10 seconds. They can't do it. I said, okay.
Proprioception, that is huge.
Right. You can't stand on one leg for more than 3 seconds. How do you think running's going for you when you're putting 2 to 4 times body weight through your limb? Now all of a sudden you got an Achilles issue, you got plantar fasciitis, you got low back issues. And oftentimes it's not the leg that's deficient. It's the side that works pretty well. Because guess what you're doing a little bit more on that side? You're leaning into it because your nervous system says, well, this side's safer, so I'm just going to overuse that. And then you can start looking up kinetic chain. Well, maybe the ankle doesn't dorsiflex. Maybe the glutes aren't turning on because of a hip capsule issue. And now we moved into the Achilles. Like, when you start to look at injuries from what's moving and what's not moving, it gets so simple as to, this is why you blew this up. Because you accumulated forces into this area because the parts above and below aren't doing their job.
This is so important what you just said. Will, we may be done with the rest of our podcast. We have all the answers to the injuries now. We've been waiting for this.
Yeah, it's really important, right? So awesome. you guys mentioned that people usually don't come see you until there's a problem, right? So how do we get ahead of this, right? Because you're saying, that it's almost kind of like the wrist bone connected to the elbow bone. Like we're kind of going through all that stuff.
Yeah.
How do we get that information out there, or where it becomes preventative?
Yeah.
What's the thought process going forward, and how do we channel this information to say this is what you need to do in order to run?
Yeah.
Or when you wake up, and if you can't do this, this, and this, then you should avoid these exercises, or you might have complications. How does this grow?
The solution I came up with, at least for my athletes, because I'm not going to teach them the AMT stuff. It's very clinical. It's very, nuanced. So I created what's called a SAM scan, a self-awareness movement scan. The research says, well, the biggest predictor of an injury is an old injury. And I agree with that when it comes to if it's a repeat injury. But I think the greatest predictor of an injury is a lack of self-awareness, because people come in and they're typing at their desk all day, and then they're doing this, right? Turning their head to the right 1,000 times. And they're like, my neck, I got this neck pain, shoulder pain, and I have no idea where it came from. No, you do. Yeah. It's just you did 1,000 of these for the last 10 years, and all of a sudden now you can't turn your head to the left, and everything's moving, and you're compressing joints and nerves.
I'm getting neck pain talking about this right now.
Right. Right. So
I know my hip hurts. Wait, hold on. My hip.
There's always a reason. It's just people aren't aware of what they're doing in their environment. So the simplest thing I could come up with was I kind of streamlined a little self-assessment scan. I call it the SAM scan. And I use 3 cerebellar tests to make sure there's no top-down control issues. So cerebellum, like Sharp-and-Romberg, a Fukuda test, and some coordinated movements. If those are clear, then we look at what's the neck doing. Can you bend it, extend it, rotate it, side bend? Can you touch your toes? Can you back bend? Can you rotate? Can you side bend? Can you single leg balance? Can you squat? If any of those things feel different, because it's hard to assess ourselves, but I tell the athletes, I'm like, you feel pinch, pain, or pull? And does one side feel different than the other? If there's a yes, now we go, it's a little bit of an algorithm. Okay, you feel like rotation's not working? Check the hip. Can you open up the hip with a Faber's test? Can you rotate your T-spine? Yes or no? And if there's a no to those, great. Now you know you need to improve rotation through the T-spine and rotation through the hip. Go back, check your global rotation. Clean? Good. Off you go. It streamlines a lot of their prep work, because the older they get, they come in with 30 exercises that they need to do before training. I'm like, you don't have time for this. So now you're going to do a 3-minute scan, 2 minutes of corrective exercises, rescan yourself, and then now you're balanced. Now go do your warm-up. So it's just helping them create a little bit of self-awareness in what's optimal, what's suboptimal, what is deemed as, if it's pinchy, it might be a joint. If it's pulley, it might be soft tissue. And if it doesn't feel right, it might be just a motor control problem. So then you have solutions to the problems that you're feeling as an athlete, or even as just a general person who just doesn't want to get hurt. But I think we have to have these baselines of movement, and that's the kind of the simplest thing I could come up with. And then you can even use something as simple as, you go, it's deadlift day. Well, go deadlift your warm-up weight. What does that feel like? If it feels like a 1 out of 10, easy, great, you're probably good. If you approach it and you're like, this feels like a 7 out of 10 effort, something's not right. So now you're using warm-up weights that are safe. So it's a form of evaluation, but it doesn't feel right. Go do something to make that feel easy, because the nervous system loves easy. If something feels easy, that means everything's organized. That means the nervous system's all switched on the right way. If something feels difficult, the nervous system is protecting something. It's inhibiting, it's downregulating, it's guarding. So now when we look at the nervous system, which is that second pillar, well, when we measure movement, that's neurology. That's looking at our output. That's looking at, is what we're doing safe, or is it not safe? Is it desirable or undesirable? Because if something is desirable, the nervous system takes the brakes off, it organizes, and it increases motor output, which is mobility, which is strength. If it doesn't like something, or you moved inappropriately, it locks it down, creates inhibition and weakness. Now we feel weaker. So when we're paying attention to these things, our body will tell us exactly if we're doing something wrong or not. We just have to pay attention to it, because the body's not stupid. If it was stupid, we wouldn't be here as a species.
Yeah.
Going back
Can
to
you
that you were talking about, it's that awareness, that self-awareness that we tend to neglect, and maybe you're trained at this point that you're really hyper aware of what you're doing. I think a lot of us, and I'm speaking for myself, that sometimes we kind of we have awareness, but we kind of move through it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then that's where we kind of put ourselves in situations where they can be, you know, consequences, or we're like, well, today was deadlift day, I'm going to go deadlift. So how do we, you know, have that mindset to say, it's all right, bro, let's do something else and back off of this. Anyway, go ahead, Dr. Garcia.
No, I was going to say, I don't want to say sidetrack from that comment, but do you do, when you talk to these athletes about the sort of reset, right? That's the 3 minute, 2 minute kind of thing. What's the reevaluation period that you recommend for that, right? Because like you're gonna you see these athletes, right? Like all these pros, it's like there's a new injury each time, right? So there's when do you recheck yourself? When do you reset yourself, or do you keep the routine for a certain amount of time?
Every time, every client coming in, I do a quick scan. I want to see how they're moving globally. Did the exercises that I gave them the session before, did it make a change, and did it make lasting change? Because if it didn't make lasting change, I have to start thinking, okay, that didn't hold. Why? I need to go back through the system to find out what did I miss? Or maybe there's a higher priority that I missed, because the body is organized in priority. When you think about how we're developed embryologically, we're just layers. Like we have those germ layers, right? And they're all tubes. But then you look at how we're organized from just a structural perspective. Where's all the important structures? Right in the midline, right? Spinal cord, organs, brain. Okay. And then as we move to the periphery, those structures are less important for survival. We need all this in the middle for survival. So if there's compromise to our center, then if we start working outwards and we start increasing power and output, the nervous system won't let us increase strength because this is compromised. We developed from the ground up. When we're looking at, you guys have children?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? Where do they first learn to move? On the ground.
Yep.
What are they developing? Their center of strength, their center of gravity, their neck control. How important, like you're watching your baby and you're like, oh, neck control. Okay. But you see the head doing this.
Yep.
It's a writing reflex. It's all reflexive. You put something in their hand. It's a reflex. When they activate the hand, the shoulder packs. Everything is reflexes early on, right? And if we go back down to the ground and we start looking at our center, if we develop strength and mobility from the center out, well, the periphery tends to take care of itself a lot of times too. But if we start to sit on machines too much, or we start to strengthen the periphery and we start overpowering our center of like our spine, the nervous system starts to shut down and we get plateaued. People are just like, oh, I plateaued on my squat. I'm like, yeah, but you can't touch your toes anymore. Like you've got this little pain in your back. So your nervous system is protecting you. You should thank it why it gave you that plateau, because plateaus are protective. If there's no pain or dysfunction, then we know it's a connective tissue or a structure problem, because the nervous system will not allow you to keep loading muscles if the joints and the tendons can't handle it. It's good because you're going to blow them up. But when we look at biology, how long does it take muscles to adapt? 6 to 8 weeks. How long does it take tendons to adapt? 6 to 8 months. So it's a slower process, which is why when we plateau, we have to be patient with that, keep working the repetitions. And all of a sudden, once the connective tissue and the structure catches up to the neuromuscular system, all of a sudden, next level.
I think this point you're making is really important. I think that the listeners always wonder, what do the athletes have that we don't? And they get someone like you, right? So that's the difference, right? They're special patients, but then you hear this, like, all the knowledge that we just heard is fairly unique, even though this is something that you guys teach and some of the high level people teach. It's just that we don't hear this as layman people. I mean, even as orthopedic surgeon, I don't hear this that often.
Right.
And when the athletes say, how do I get back? I'm like, well, I can fix you. But you know, after the surgery's done, you're near 95% of the work when they come to see you. Yeah. And so that's really important and hard for me to understand, right? I'm in the office, I got 5-10 minutes with a patient. They come in, they're in pain or they're post-op and they're trying to recover. They're like, well, what else can I do? I'm like, honestly, they got to see people like you, because you guys can look at the whole body. You can recenter them. I'm not the expert at the lower back. I'm not the expert at the core. But as you keep talking about core and lower back is just boring. Right? Like there's no glamour there, right?
No.
You can get abs. That's great. You can have a nice lower back. You don't ever say the guy's got a nice lower back. I mean, maybe I don't usually say that, but Will maybe does, but different animal. But
all the time.
All the time. But you know what I mean? Like we all want buys. We all want nice legs. We want to be super athletic. But I mean, there's so many people. I mean, look at me. I can barely lift my neck up because I have so much surgery and I'm just like, my back's always in full spasm.
Right.
And it's because we forget about that. I mean, those power lifters, like you said, like people can't touch their toes.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a huge problem. And that's one of these things we always talk about. Like you see, Will, we've talked about this, like these athletes that are doing like yoga and they're doing ballet. And right, why are they doing that? Because they're trying to go back to the basics. The idea of like the simplest, like, you know, people used to tease about this stuff, but really it's the funny part is like, that's what makes these the really good ones better than the lots of good ones. Yeah.
I mean, so you can look at the other, you know, you have one end of the spectrum where you have your power lifters who are very tight and stiff, which to their sport can give them a mechanical advantage because they can use that stiffness, right? They're a stiff spring. They don't have to use as much muscular energy to push and load the weight. They can use their connective tissue. But then you have the other end where you have the yogis and they're too hypermobile, or the dancers. And you can do a full back bridge, but you have back pain too. But they're unstable. They can't hang on to tension long enough and they're moving too much. So now the nervous system is trying to lock up and stabilize them to prevent them from moving because they just can't hang on to tension. They're not strong enough. And then you have the power lifters. Well, they have back pain because nothing moves enough.
So, and these something you have to worry about with surgery too, right? Like our patients, like, is this a loose patient or is this a tight patient?
Right.
And people don't realize that, you know, the patient comes in, she's like, I've had 25 surgeries. I keep dislocating things. I can go put my hand behind her back.
Right.
I have the same patient with dislocation of one thing. And I'm like, listen, it's a totally different perspective, right? One of them, I'm going to force like no surgery. This is a bad problem. The other one, I'm like, maybe this is an issue. So the same thing you're talking about, in my head, each patient I see, I'll see 3 or 4 of the same thing, and each one has a different category.
Yeah.
And it's what you're talking about. And the connective tissue makes a huge difference. This is something that's important. Will, you have something you're about to say?
No, I was just kind of pretty much, you know, what you guys are talking about, right? You're talking about, you know, reducing pain and improving movements. And I know that you've been teaching these, you know, neuro hacks to clinicians. I just wanted to see if, you know, if these were some of the examples that you're teaching, or do you actually have other ones that involve with the neuro hacks?
Neuro hacks as in like using
like just to improve movement and also creating strength, you know, as you're teaching that not only to your patients but also to the people that are working with you.
So we can use the fun part about the nervous system is when you apply something to it, if it's desirable, it changes pretty quick. So Will, I see you're standing up, right?
I am.
Okay, so if you take a step back, can you touch your toes?
Oh, probably not. I've been standing up.
I want to see if I can get you touching your toes right now.
I touch my ankles.
Okay, not too bad. Okay, so you have a tight neck, correct?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, okay. I want you to just use a simple isometric. You're going to take your hands. You're going to take your neck as far as you can go. I want you to look down at the floor.
Okay.
Push your head into your hands. 5 seconds.
I'm going to do this too.
Okay, and now bend forward and touch your toes. Okay, take your hands off, touch your toes.
Yeah, I touched my toes.
Right.
All right. Thanks for coming, Tom. We're done with you, brother.
But you can see
this is amazing.
One end affected the other. And everyone's just like, well, I have tight hamstrings. I'm like, you probably don't. I mean, you might, but you don't. But if your neck doesn't bend, these flexors tie in with these flexors. So if these aren't working, these flexors are not working. If these ones aren't working, guess what you're overusing? You're using all the extensors too much on the backside. And now you're trying to use extensors to lower yourself to touch your toes rather than use the flexors to pull yourself. All we did was we facilitated a circuit, the flexor circuit starting from the neck and your eyes, because when you look down, it initiates flexion. And all of a sudden the nervous system organized from the top down, and all of a sudden you could touch your toes. It works the same way. Like if you got a tight neck or a tight low back,
here we go
here and then do a little back bend and see if it takes away a pinchy low back.
It feels
good. What? I think we got our new sports talk rehab specialist. You know, every time we call someone, we get the docs are tired and they're stiff.
Sick of us. He's gonna be, guys, come on, man. Now
I do.
You're gonna get so many people calling you for help after this episode. I can't wait.
I do.
Awesome.
I have a presentation that I do. I've done it at the Ontario Physiotherapy Association. It's my 8 neuro hacks to move better and reduce pain in 60 seconds or less. And I make it interactive because it's a 30-minute presentation, but I use different breathing techniques, eye exercises, isometrics, tapping for proprioception, and a few other things. And all of a sudden, everyone's touching their toes. They're single leg bounce, they can squat. And I ask people, which one worked for you? And they're like, oh, for me, it was the eyes. I'm like, okay, cool, because we stretched out the eyes, and the eyes initiate the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the part of the brain that measures rate, rhythm, force, and accuracy. But it's 10% of the mass, but it's 90% of all the neurons, or 50% of all the neurons. So you've got a majority of those neurons in that 10% mass, but it regulates all your movement. But if you stimulate it with canal bouncing in the inner ear, the visual system, isometrics, spiraling, anything cross body or creating figure eights, it stimulates that part of the brain. And that's the part of the brain that we first learned to use to move as children.
This is
different. I feel
Will. I feel, dude. I don't know about you, Will. I feel stiff, but I feel enlightened. So this is great. Tom, I do not want to miss out on the opportunity to talk about your certification.
Sure.
Okay, so if we could have you on for like 3 hours, then all the social medias would hate us because it's a 3-hour show.
We're not doing that.
We're not going to keep you on for 3 hours, I promise you. But I want to get to the advanced movement therapist certification, because obviously this is unique, right? There's not many people I know. I do know tons of therapists in the area. I work with tons of them as a sports doc. But I want to learn about this. Can you talk about like the process you went through? What does it mean? I mean, this is something that people are going to want to know about. They're going to want to know, hey, if one of the therapists I know sees this, they might be like, hey, I'm interested in learning more of these sort of the stuff that you're talking about. So can you talk about what the certification is?
Yeah. So, I mean, it came out of my own frustration where, like I said, it was flavor of the month for every client. I do more courses. I'm like, here's the answer to all my problems. And it just became guessing. I hate guessing. And then finding these principles across it, I started to organize it. So what I did is I created a framework. We look at posture assessment. How's the body holding itself? What's it avoiding? What's it hiding? I mean, a lot of people say, well, posture doesn't tell you much. No, it's true. It doesn't tell you much, but it can kind of guide you as to, well, what's the body hiding? What's it protecting? What's it guarding? Where's atrophy? Like all these little things. And then you look at how the body's moving as a system first, and then you start breaking down the parts. But the third thing we always check is the neurological system, because everybody is neuro until proven otherwise. Why? Because the nervous system controls everything. If I have neural tension, if I have central neurodynamic issues in my spine, if I do a slump test, I need to take care of that before I try and go after tight hamstrings or tight low back. Because if the nerves aren't sliding, nothing's going to work. I need to look at myotomes. I need to look at upper extremity. Then we look at the pieces. We start to split it, upper, lower body. We start to look at what are the shoulders doing? What are the hips doing? What are the ankles doing? So we start to break it down into the parts, but we need to know what the difference is between active and passive and what is optimal. Because if you don't have optimal range of motion, I'm like, well, why is that side moving different than that side? Is it an anatomical problem, or is it a mechanical issue that we have to go after? Because if we can change it, I want to change it. So, because again, when we look at physics, we want to see where's energy moving. If forces are avoiding this area, but moving over here, this could be why you have this injury. And then we start to look at, and then the later things are the special tests, but I literally organized everything we do as clinician in an orthopedic assessment in an algorithm. It's in this specific flow. And it starts with communication, and then it works at the global movements. It looks at neurology, and then it starts to look at the parts. And then as you move from there, you can start doing what I call connectivity testing. The foot has, just like the hand and the shoulder, they have a reflex, but you can test them together to see if the muscles of the hip are being turned off because of a foot issue. If you've got an overcollapsed foot or there's a proprioception problem, if I put my hand on that foot and I test the hip rotators, the hip turns off. Well, why? When I tested the hips on their own, they were fine. But we know, okay, the foot is inhibiting the hip. So then you can start to look at all this connectivity and what's influencing what in the system, because nothing works independently. So we start to go through the pieces and the parts. And then once we find those linchpins or those primary areas of dysfunction, we correct those. And then we start working our way back up. So we correct from the ground up, right? Most of the times people have to go back on the ground to reset stuff. But then we start to look at, well, what directions can you control? What body parts aren't talking to one another? If they have a concussion, there's a whole separate algorithm to look at cerebellum, visual, vestibular, and then inner ear. So when somebody tells me in their history, oh yeah, I have an old concussion, I need to screen that first. I can't assume that that's gone, because even old concussions can still cause new orthopedic problems because one side can fire different than the other.
I don't want to interrupt you, Tom, but this is a constant topic on our show, concussions.
Yep.
Right, Will?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think this is huge. I mean, it's always hard to find someone that deals with concussions. So the idea, I'm not going to go after you with concussions right now, but
We
I
can do
want to
that
make sure
later.
the listeners here,
Yep.
we later. But the idea is that, like you just brought it up, it's just like he's thinking about everything here.
Yep.
Tom, will you tell us what sort of I saw on your website there's different certification timelines. Like how long would a therapist? I'm assuming most therapists are the ones that would do this course.
Yeah.
How long would that take a therapist to do this course roughly, certification?
So it's a total of 28 hours, level 1 and level 2. I mean, it's go at your own rate. We have anybody who starts with our company, they have to have the level 1 done in the first 3 months. So this is I think this is a live workshop that I was doing. I was doing it live before, but now it's on demand. So everybody can start today. You go through quizzes, you go through the textbook, and then you finish the examination at the end of level 1, and then you can apply to take level 2, which is when we get into the neurology, the gait, the ballistics, all the high performance stuff is in level 2 when we get into kettlebells, gymnastics, and all the other training components of it. But I mean, if someone's eager, they can finish it in a couple months, level 1 and 2.
Do you have a requirement for the type of person that you're looking for to be with these, be involved and learn from these courses, or is it just open to anyone that just wants to learn?
So over COVID, I was able to test this hands-free. This doesn't have to be anybody who's working with people, who's trying to get them out of pain. You could be a kinesiologist, you can be an athletic trainer. Yep. So if you have hands, if you have a license to use your hands and test and use manual therapy, great, because that allows you to change the inputs faster. If you don't, well, this is when you use specifically lacrosse balls and foam rollers and bands to go after joint issues. But you're going to learn when you apply those at what parts at the right time. Because a lot of times people just randomly foam rolling everything. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you don't need to foam roll. Like, you should be doing some rolling patterns. Like, you're not stiff.
That was me for a while. I understand.
Sure. And it feels good.
But I've learned now from Tom, I'm not doing that ever again.
But if it feels good. Okay, so here's the thing. I'll get on the foam roll. My lats tighten up. It changes the inputs. As long as you know what you're doing and what you're doing it for, and as long as it's making a change, I'm all for it. But if you don't know why you're doing it, and if it's just randomly rolling around and you haven't checked anything to see if you're changing anything, then we're wasting our time, right?
I think that was what you said was perfect. I don't want to interrupt you, but I don't mind popping in, but I want to make sure the listeners hear this. If you don't know if you made progress, there's no point in doing it.
No.
I think that is excellent, because there's patients that come in and I'm like, so how do you feel? It's been 3 months since we saw each other. I don't know. Right. Did you feel it? I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Where does it hurt? I don't know. Or I can't tell you. Right. That is extremely important, because if you don't have self-awareness of what's going on, you don't know. I mean, one of my father-in-law is a occuloplastic surgeon. He talks about the pain scales. And the interesting thing he brought up is that someone comes in, they say the pain level of 6 or 5. And the next 6 months, they say it's the same level, hasn't gone better.
Right.
Usually it means it actually has. It's just they got so sick of the pain that they can't tolerate it anymore. And the ones that tell you that it's gotten worse, that's where it's actually gotten worse.
Right.
So it's this concept of, there's also the mental aspect.
Yeah.
But the idea is, like, if you don't know how you were and where you're going, or what you were at before, and you don't write it down or learn about it, you can't understand your progress. And like you said, if you're rolling your foam and then, like, you never checked, Will did his test, right? He put his hands in his head. He's able to put his feet down. If you don't check it and you don't know what you can't do and what you do now, then you have no idea what's going on, and you can't conceptually make progress.
No, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And what you don't measure, you can't change. So this is where, like, when I got Will, I'm like, touch your toes first before we do anything. Okay, we have a baseline. Now let's do an intervention. Great, we did the intervention. Let's check our work. Let's see if it changed. If it didn't change, let's try something else. Mm-hmm. The one thing that drives me bonkers is therapists. I'm going to blame therapists. They're doing the same treatment on the person. There's no change. And when they finally come and see me, they're like, yeah, I was seeing so-and-so for like a year. I was like, well, they're super nice. And, it felt good, but nothing changed. I'm like, well, were they doing the same treatment all the time? Yeah. Well, how did you measure change? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, well, you know what the definition of insanity is?
Doing the same thing, but not
and expecting it. So I blame both of them, but I blame the therapist more, because they're the person in charge and who should be checking their work to see if the patient is making changes. And if they're not, shame on you.
this is Will, this is literally like my day every day, right? You have the patients. I have the patients that come in, and I have my go-tos, right? And I really want good ones.
Yeah.
And they come in. I know the patient's been checked, right? I'm like, what's your quad score?
Yeah.
No idea,
Right.
right? Like, what's your quad score? 75%. Boom, they know. So
Yeah.
that's the therapist, or that's the ATC or whatever,
Yep.
that's doing the checks and doing the reset. Like, okay,
Yep.
you're not. Let's check your progress. But I know there's some people, and I go, wait a second, who you go to? Like, what are you doing? Because you clearly are not making progress. And then the problem is, see, for you, you're coming in, you're the opinion. For
Yeah.
me, I'm the surgeon. I've fixed them, so they're
Yeah.
expecting the results they want. I have the same surgery. One patient is absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
One patient is not. And the reason is that a lot of times it's because they're not getting those checks.
No.
And I have to switch things up. It's like what you're saying. They're really nice, but they haven't done a great job. And I will fire people frequently and move on to a group because I'm not happy with the way the progress is going. And I know what my patients should do, right? It's like, you see this person. So that point is so important for the patients to hear, right? There's times when there's complications from surgery and you're not doing well because there's a problem. Sure. But there's way more often a time where you've gotten stalled because you're not getting the repetitive checks and no one's giving you the goals where you actually need to be.
Exactly.
You know, you're such a passionate educator, right? And we start off the show talking about you're always consuming knowledge. You're at a standard now for yourself and for others. What are you looking for internally, externally, to keep growing in the areas that you are? Like, is there something there that, like, yeah, I do this, and this. I want to keep building on that, but I want to focus now on something else. Is there something else that you're kind of looking forward to and being passionate about that you're just kind of tacking onto your resume as your career continues to grow?
Yeah, no, like everything is moving in the direction. I like to think outside the box, because the more things, the more perspectives. Again, this is why I came up with those 5 tenets, because I love learning about physics. Well, how can I apply that to the physical body? How does that pertain to injury? How does that pertain to pain? That's where I started to, I started looking at physics. I'm like, oh, this is an overuse injury, right? When I was working with one of my mentors, he was huge in traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And he would use some language that I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying, but I appreciate it. I'm like, oh shit, he's talking about physics and neurology. Like when he's talking about the channels and the meridians, I'm like, oh, that's physics. I get it now, right? Like when we're looking at specific things, I'm like, oh, that's the nervous system. Right? Like it's when you start to pull from all these different realms, you have principles that you bounce those ideas off of. Now you can assimilate information more easily because I can compartmentalize it.
Gotcha.
And now I can hear something once. As soon as I compartmentalize that into the framework that I've created, I know when to pull that out because I've placed it in the right spot. It's not random information anymore. And now I can pull that out whenever I want, that anecdote, that case study or whatever, because I've put it into a file that makes sense in a framework based on principles.
Gotcha.
And Tom, do you think that some of the stuff that you talked about, like you said, the certification and hearing your podcast, with being on this podcast and seeing your stuff on your website, is that going to help someone get up to speed? I mean, you have a lot of knowledge. You have an unusually awesome desire for more knowledge based on how many certifications you've done. I really hear what you're saying and learning all this stuff so quickly. But do you think, how would someone who's young, and I know you're young too, and we're all young, but basically someone who's new, how are they gonna not see this and go, oh my God, that seems like no possible way I could be that way? What's your suggestion for the new one? New person?
All I did was I just distilled it down. The way I'm talking about the principles, we don't go over that in the certification. I'm actually writing a book right now on my experience and how to
stay tuned, guys.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
You
get the heads up.
That is another journey on its own. So a lot of the things that we talk about is going to be in the book, but when it comes to the actual certification, it's the nuts and bolts. It's the practical use stuff. It's a lot of it's going to be very familiar to people. But it's going to be organized in the exact way in which to apply it. So I just helped create organization from the chaos in what we do as practitioners. I'll give you, so as an example, we always hire new grads. I love new grads. And when we first opened our clinic, we're like, okay, we're the top clinic. The expectations are high. And we would hire 20-year vets coming in and they have so many bad habits. I'm like, okay, this isn't working. And they don't want to learn. And then like, okay, let's try new grads. And then they would wash out after 6 months because they're not effective out of school and they lose confidence and their caseloads are emptying, right? Because the expectations are high coming into our facility. I'm like, what is it we're doing? Like, how do I teach this? And then, so I use this as part of, one, I'm organizing what I'm doing. Two, it's a training system for all my staff so that they get really good, really quick. And then even for clinic owners, they can use this as a training manual as a high standard across all clinicians, young or old. Everyone's talking the same language. Doesn't matter who the patient sees. Everyone's going to be good. So I have a 2-year clinician. I would pit him against a 10-year who's got their F-camped and needling any day to find the actual problem and be effective quickly. So it really shortcuts what I'm seeing and what the feedback I'm getting back. It's shortcutting a lot of their success.
We'll show that feedback.
Hold on a second. You just throwing stuff here.
Well, we got 4 minutes left. I want you to show the feedback before we get up. I don't want to kick off Tom, but the social media is going to be mad at us if we go over an hour. And I knew this was going to happen with him. So basically, obviously we got to wind down.
Sure.
I know we, maybe have you on in another year or so because it's been awesome, and I want to make sure that. But again, we really appreciate you coming on. You talked a lot about all the stuff you do, and obviously you can look at these glowing reviews. To really sidetrack, maybe your final comment for patients listening, right? Because not everyone can go visit you in Ontario,
sure,
right? That'd be awesome if they could, but not everybody can.
We're not doing a road trip. I thought we were going up there. I'm ready to go up there. He got me.
I am too.
On my forehead. I'm ready to go.
Too. Listen, I got my plane ticket book. I've been booking it while you guys have been talking.
I'm pretty sure Tom's got a couple of nice restaurants that we could go to and hang out and meet the wife. Yeah. We talk about his wife that's working with
Will,
him.
You're digressing my question.
About.
I said we have 3 minutes left, and now you're disrupting me.
My bad. I apologize.
No. So for patients, long-lasting effects, like how do you keep this? Like, right? Like, how do patients see, because someone's not going to be able to see you all the time, right? Either, it's, in the US, it's insurance-based or things like that. In Canada, it's sometimes a little bit different, but nonetheless, like, what's your sort of goals for these patients that get all this information? Like, should Will go home every day and do this just so he gets himself into a stretching mode?
Right now, with my wife and daughter, we're going to.
A lot of it's just educating the patient, what's going on, what they can do. Don't focus on what they can't do. Show them the changes that are happening so that there's buy-in. Clients that come in for that first appointment, if all of a sudden I get their pain down from a 10 to a 3 and they're moving better than they ever have, great. Now I have buy-in. They have belief because I showed them their ability, and belief often comes before ability. But sometimes I have to change their ability to change their belief. And once we've changed that, now we've affected their psychology, and then they can move forward. And then they're going to take what they know to continue to apply it to continue to move forward.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, our time has ended because we are at 58 minutes and 26 seconds. Will, do you want any closing remarks?
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We know it's past your bedtime. So it's something that we recognize. It's great information. And we, once again, we're just really thankful that you could take some time, join us, and really educate the listeners, educate ourselves, because God knows what I'm going to show my wife and daughter now and see what we could take from that. But just remind everybody, check us out, sportsdoctalk.com. We've got shows, transcripts, and we're always looking for other shows. So we're very happy and pleased with the feedback that we've been getting from everyone. And as always, we're really thankful for our guests like Tom. Tom, thank you very much. Dr. Garcia, say goodbye.
Yep, Grant.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm really excited for the listeners to hear this one.
Awesome.
And I think, this is going to be a really, this episode is going to come up a few times in our next podcast, because we learned a lot today. So thank you so much. And as always, this is not what I expected this episode to be. So this is absolutely awesome. It's way better. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
To change the mind, I channel the body. I love it. Good stuff.
So he's going to say that all day now.